Alright, so we're on our last cup, and then we're going to trim the plate. I'm just looking around in these trimmings for some of that wet clay I trimmed earlier, because my lugs are getting a little bit dry. And I'm going to use that to sort of help me adhere it to the base. So this particular cup is a little bit on the drier side. And you'll see that something's about to happen. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Oh, fast reflexes. That doesn't matter. I still hit those bat pins. There's a lovely little dent on this side. I was fast enough to catch it before it went crazy and hit all the corners, but that doesn't mean anything. It still got pockmarked a little bit. So it did that because it is a little bit drier than I'd need it to be, but also because of the weight distribution. The bottom is significantly heavier than the top. So it really just wanted to fly off. So I'm just double checking I line that up right. After as many years as I've been doing that, I'm getting pretty good at like getting it eyeballed right on center. That's a special skill you develop over time. But until you've got that down, I would definitely recommend just double checking. All the lugs in the world couldn't have saved that. So I'm being extra careful now, and I'm going to try to clean up as much of that as I can, and I think I can definitely clean up the edge where it got scraped up a little bit and make that even, because I think there's a lot of material on the bottom to sort of cut away from. However, where the design is, I'm not going to be able to fix that. It's just too integrated into the side. So I'll probably put that little scar, when I put the handle on, I'll probably put the handle right where that scar is, so that way I can sort of kind of hide it. But that might change my mind. I could make it like come back later and sort of make it part of the aesthetic. It could be a really nice addition. So when I go to attach the handle, I'll make that decision. So now that I'm getting into trimming it, another reason why it flew off is because this pot was not centered properly. If you can't really see it quite as well from the camera, but right on top of it, you can sort of see that the center where I'm trimming the foot is egg-shaped. It's a little ovid. So that means one side of the clay has significantly more clay than the other. And notice how it's sort of like wobbling on the wheel head anyway. So for this particular, if you see that happening or if you feel that happening, you can just be extra careful with your trimming. It's going to be more likely to fly off multiple times, and that's because it is so dry. So for this one, I'm just going to do my best. I know this one's not going to be perfect, and I don't anticipate it to be. We're just going for good enough. So when you trim, you'll find you're going to get some little boogers on the top, and you can't always wipe those off as well as you'd like. You can use your hand or wait till they dry a little bit, or get like a nice clean paintbrush and just brush them away. You don't want to push them too much, because what happens is they end up embedding themselves in the side of your pot, and then it's just a little ugly. It's not beautiful. So like I said, I'm going for good enough. This is my inset foot. Alright, so we're back at it again, and I've got that plate I threw. So when you throw wide things, you've got to definitely measure to make sure that you're not going to hit those bat pins. This one just happens to be wide enough to sit right between them. If you've got a wider plate, make sure you put a bat down first. It's not going to be quite as easy to center, but it'll still work just fine. Because you want to make sure you've got enough space to trim that plate properly. Now, when you go to check for the leveling of this, make sure you ignore if you've got a little bit of skirt on the bottom of your piece or a little bit of excess material. Don't use that as your leveling guide. Use the most even feeling point. You know, use the center of the pot in that case. This is ill-advised. I don't know why I chose to do this. I thought I was overconfident. So what I ended up doing is I didn't lug it down, and that was a mistake. So always make sure to put a little bit of clay on the edges to keep it from flying off. This plate, much like that last mug, is a little drier than we'd like it to be. It's actually pretty far on the dry end. So if you leave your plates on the bat too long and they dry out, you should be reasonably able to just pop them off. That's how you know you've left it on too long. You can sort of just pop it right off without having to use your wire tool or your knife. That's a bad sign. So if you can do that, your pot is too dry to trim generally. So I am quickly finding out, ooh, that was the dance of shame. My pot was dry enough that it didn't take on too much damage, so I'm going to be able to finish it. It's not going to be pretty on the top, but I can finish trimming it, which is sort of the end goal anyway. I'm going to use these as testers for glazes. Notice how this one is also a little egg-shaped. Oh, I don't learn from my mistakes, do I? I'm just trying to get that excess, like, side off. There's just a little too much material. This is why trimming that little skirt off is important, because it's going to give you grief if all that stuff is just left on the side and it dries. It's going to just be so much harder to trim. If you take it off while it's wet, it's just going to be a much more pleasant experience. But the problem is I left this on the bat too long, and it got too dry, so I didn't have time to come back to it and trim off that excess before it got bad. Because ideally I would have taken that off while it was still a little wet, and then I would have wired off the plate from the bat. I would have used my wire tool. So it's gonna not be exactly perfect. It's gonna be a little bit wonky feeling, and that's okay. Obviously, this is not like, I'm not selling this as a dinner set to anybody. It's not. I'm not looking for perfection, but it's pretty typical for a plate that got abandoned. So you just sort of do your best, try to get it as even as possible. At this point, it's probably going to be impossible to get it exactly even because the bottom is so very off. But I'll do my best and we'll see what we get. Okay, so just like before, both hands pull out to the center. This pot is super dry, and I'm finding that even more and more as I'm pulling. So I'm probably this is going to be another situation of where I just do my best. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be even at all, but I'm going to do my best. Notice how I flipped my tool. Sometimes the obvious angle is not always the best angle. Sometimes the funniest shape is going to be the most useful. I'm just checking to make sure it's not too thin, that I haven't pushed it too far, because I'd sort of like to take it, like I said, like in this direction. I think I wanted to go one or two more if I could. And I like, for these, I like a sort of variation of the teacup foot, where the definition of the side of the plate is very different from the inside, from the foot. So I like a little bit of definition here. This is definitely not the best foot I've ever done. It's probably not even among top 10. So it's good enough though. Good enough. So with plates, you have to be really careful. This plate is pretty dry, so I was able to pick it up properly, but normally you want to be very, very ginger, and if you can leave it on the, if you trim it on a bat, I would leave it on the bat and do a little bit of like a pancake flip, where you put one bat between, you put the plate in between two bats and you just flip it over between your hands. And if anybody wants to see that happen, I'll show that to them. So what I'm motioning towards, and I'm cleaning up my mess right now, but all those trimmings in your splash pan, I'm going to say it now, do not throw those away. We can recycle them. In your little studio space, in any of these little areas, there should be buckets underneath the table. The one you're looking for is going to say white stoneware, and you're just going to put those trimmings in there, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to dissolve them in water and make them into wet clay again, that we will then dry out and reuse. And this is part of the recycling process, and this is y'all's clay, so if you at any point you want to do some recycling, please reach out to me, because we can get you 20 pounds of clay for free, but all it's going to require is just a little bit of labor.